The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Ted Cruz and John Kasich have announced their campaigns are essentially going to cede certain states in an attempt to prevent Donald Trump from reaching the 1,237 delegates that he needs to secure the Republican nomination. There were coordinated statements last night within minutes of each other. The Cruz and Kasich campaign saying that Ted Cruz is going to concentrate on Indiana, and that meanwhile, Ohio Governor John Kasich is going to put all of his effort into Oregon and New Mexico. They seem to be admitting that the only way to stop Trump is a coordinated effort against Donald Trump, which is pretty wild, but it doesn't appear to be untrue at this point. It's unclear whether Trump would reach 1237 anyway, but this seems to be the path forward if you are not Trump.
Yeah, it's they're still in competition with each other, though, and so I'm not sure why this is necessary for them.
Well, I guess they both think, listen, if we don't coordinate against Trump, neither one of us is going to have a shot at the convention. If we coordinate against Trump, one or both of us might still not be selected at the convention, but we would have a chance. There is a chance that we could be selected at the convention.
Yeah, I suppose. Do you think they came up with a team name for this, like or like a name for this operation?
It should be Kasich.
Kasich?
Yeah, and it also kind of includes the word crazy, which is really representative of what's going on. Jeff Rowe is Ted Cruz's campaign manager. He went first. He said, our campaign is going to focus its time and resources in Indiana and clear the path for John Kasich to compete in Oregon and New Mexico. And then minutes later, the Kasich strategist John Weaver said, due to the fact that the Indiana primary is winner-take-all statewide and by congressional district, keeping Trump from winning a plurality in Indiana is crucial to keeping him under 1,237 delegates. They are still going to compete each other in the remaining primary contest, and the Trump campaign, as of right now, didn't officially respond to this strategy, but Trump himself is going completely off the rails, Lewis. I saw on CNN a Trump supporter say that this is absolutely crazy, and here's a tweet that Donald Trump put out on his Twitter account. Wow, just announced that Lion, Ted, and Kasich are going to collude in order to keep me from getting the Republican nomination. Desperation. This is clearly all insane, and the Republican Party is imploding. But it's an interesting strategy if they can pull it off, in particular because aside from the delegate math, it might align the more moderate Republican primary voters who are supporting John Kasich and the more conservative Republican primary voters that are supporting Ted Cruz. It could align them together against what I call the nationalist egotist base of the Donald Trump supporters.
Yeah, well, this definitely gives Donald some fuel.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's going to translate to more votes, but Donald Trump could still walk away with the correct amount of delegates no matter what, right?
It's possible. Again, I don't see him getting to 1237, and there is a risk here. This could alienate Republican voters who see this and they say, oh, I support Cruz as a general rule, or I support Kasich generally, but I don't really like this coordination. It's feeling undemocratic, and there is a risk here to alienating Republican voters, and we'll follow it. We'll see what the impact of this is. Let's talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is getting slammed all over the place after saying on Meet the Press yesterday that he's losing states to Hillary Clinton, in part because poor people don't vote. Here's Chuck Todd interviewing Senator Sanders yesterday. I have a lot to say about this. Let's take a listen to the clip first.
Of the 25 states with the highest levels of income inequality have held primaries. 16 of those 17 states have been won by Hillary Clinton, not by you. Why?
Well, because poor people don't vote. I mean, that's just a fact. That's the sad reality of American society, and that's what we have to transform. We have, what, as you know, one of the lowest voter turnouts of any major country on earth. We have done a good job bringing young people in. I think we have had some success with lower income people. But in America today, in the last election in 2014, 80% of poor people did not vote.
You feel as if you could find a way to get people that are fighting at that poverty line, you know, either just below it or just above it, if they were getting engaged in the process, you would do better?
If we can significantly increase voter turnout so that low-income people and working people and young people participated in the political process, if we could have a voter turnout of 75%, this country would be radically transformed.
Bernie is getting hit really hard for this, and a lot of people have reacted as if he's trashing poor people. Some say that he's making racially tinged comments. One comment I saw online said, if Trump said poor people don't vote, it would be correctly called racist code language. Bernie shouldn't get a free pass because he's a liberal. Let's break this down piece by piece, Louis. This really requires some analysis. Is it true as a general rule that when voter turnout is higher, the more progressive candidate wins? Absolutely. And that's sort of what Bernie said at the end. If we could increase voter turnout, then that would help me. Is it sometimes racially coded when politicians talk about the poor? Yes. When politicians talk about the problem with gun violence is urban youth who are poor in cities, they're talking about black gang members typically, or Hispanic gang members. So there's no doubt that that's the case. But it wouldn't really make sense for Bernie to be using the racial codes since he's the one who's had the problem with the non-white vote in many states. So to accuse Bernie of being poor, of using poor to mean black people would be more inaccurate than it is offensive. So now let's ask the real question. Is there evidence that Bernie Sanders would be doing better if more poor people voted? The Washington Post is not sure. In the states where exit polls were conducted after primary votes were cast, Sanders still lost to Hillary Clinton among Democratic voters with household incomes below $50,000. Clinton won that demographic 55 to 44. I looked at the Ohio exit polls, Louis. Hillary won there with 56% overall. She had the biggest margin over Bernie with the voters earning under $30,000 a year. South Carolina, Hillary won with 73% of the vote. She had the biggest margin over Bernie with those earning under $30,000. I don't think it's offensive. I think Bernie's wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say overall, if overall voter turnout were higher,
right,
then Bernie would do better. But to just say that it would be the low income vote that would make it.
The facts don't
convinced.
back it up. I mean, there's what do we know based on the facts, right? We know that when voter turnout is generally higher, whoever is more progressive votes wins. This is within within Democratic primaries, within Republican primaries, in general elections at every level between Democrats and Republicans. That is true. However, I don't believe that it is poor people that are holding Bernie Sanders back here, because that is often the group that is most voting for Hillary Clinton in these primaries. Anything offensive at all in what Bernie Sanders said?
No, this is not an issue. I know it was poor choice of words, but it's not a racial issue. Low-income voter turnout is just that. It's low-income voter turnout.
If I'm missing something on this, let me know on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at @dpackman. Louis is on Twitter at Louis Motamedi.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Timothy Apple. Timothy, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join our show's membership program and get instant access to the members-only bonus show in audio and video, the commercial-free audio podcast feed just for members, the commercial-free video feed just for members with the full 1-hour show every single day as one long video file instead of short clips like we have on YouTube. So many great member benefits that you can sample and get instant access to at davidpakman.com/membership. Remember that if you ever shop on Amazon.com, you can support our show by first going to davidpakman.com/Amazon. Lots of Prince albums, Louis, being purchased through our link. Of course, Prince passing away last week. Were you a Prince fan? Is that fair to say?
No.
You weren't?
No. I mean, I respected Prince, and he was a talented guitarist. But was I a fan of his music? I would not say that.
Not just a guitarist. I mean, Prince played almost every instrument on many of his albums. And in the wake of the tragic passing of Prince at age 57. A lot of people all over, including our audience, using our Amazon link, buying Prince albums. And we're now learning more and more about the circumstances of Prince's death. And it appears that things are going in one particular direction in terms of what caused him to pass away at age 57. And once things are more clear, we'll talk about it in a little more detail. Also glad to see that a bunch of people buying both on Kindle and in in paperback. My recommendation from last week, Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything. I think everybody who buys it will enjoy it. Remember, davidpakman.com/Amazon before you shop. It will help us to keep the show going and growing. Here's a really, really unusual story from over the weekend involving Koch brother Charles Koch and Hillary Clinton and the Republican primary. There's the general question around Hillary Clinton of whether she is conservative. How conservative is she? She's clearly to the right of Bernie Sanders. How far to the left is she of your average Republican? How far to the left is she of the specific Republicans currently running? Is she too connected to Wall Street banks and financial institutions? I will remind you that the billionaire Koch brothers are some of the biggest Republican donors and kingmakers in the country. And conservative billionaire Charles Koch, one part of the Koch brother machine, was interviewed on ABC News by Jonathan Karl yesterday. The program was This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And he seemed to be saying that it is possible that incredibly infamous Republican supporters, Koch brothers, or in particular Charles Koch, could determine that Hillary Clinton is the better choice over the eventual Republican nominee. Let's take a look at the video that has gone viral in the last 24 hours.
Hearing you correctly, you think Bill Clinton was a better president than George W.
Well,
Bush?
in some ways. In other ways, I mean, he wasn't an exemplar.
Yeah.
But as far as the growth of government, the increase in spending on restrictive regulations, it was 2.5 times under Bush that it was under Clinton.
So is it possible another Clinton could be better than another Republican
It's
the next time
possible.
around?
It's possible.
You couldn't see yourself supporting Hillary Clinton, could you?
Well, we would have to believe her actions would be quite different than her rhetoric. Let me put it that way.
It is undeniable that George W. Bush exploded the deficit and that Bill Clinton was more fiscally conservative. No question there, right? Charles Koch is absolutely right about that. Hillary Clinton responded in a tweet without using Charles Koch's name, but linking to the interview. She said, not interested in endorsements from people who deny climate science and try to make it harder for people to vote. So there's one contingent, Lewis, that it was immediately out in force after this, saying this is a deliberate strategy to hurt Hillary Clinton. If people are on the fence about Hillary Clinton and they're moderate or liberal, and they hear Charles Koch say, maybe Hillary would be better than the Republican, that is a deliberate way to hurt Hillary Clinton. What do you think about that thesis?
That's totally bogus. His point about Bill Clinton and George W. Bush is accurate.
Yeah.
And really, what is there to like? I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a level-headed Republican.
Yeah.
What is there to like about the candidates in the GOP right now? Who would you really think would do a wonderful job there?
In other words, you don't deny that this might be designed to hurt Hillary Clinton because it just doesn't seem logical. You deny it because it doesn't seem that likely that Charles Koch would even like the Republican candidates.
It seems perfectly logical to me. Hillary, after all, is the one, funny, her tweet was about denying climate science. Hillary was the one going around promoting the hell out of fracking. So Hillary could very well be better for people like Koch. Like you said, if her actions were a little bit different from her rhetoric, which I fully predict them to be if she is president.
Charles Koch does seem to have some real problems with Republican ideas that are currently floating around in the race. He called Donald Trump's plan to ban Muslims monstrous. He said Ted Cruz's proposal to carpet bomb a territory held by the Islamic State is frightening and hyperbolic. The pro-Bernie crowd is quickly saying, hey, this is proof that Hillary's right-wing. Charles Koch would consider voting for her. The pro-Bernie crowd or the non-pro-Hillary crowd is saying, this is just proof of how extreme the Republican side is. This has nothing to do with Hillary's conservatism.
It's a little bit of both. I mean, Hillary, as we know, is probably someone who's going to be very good for big business and maybe billionaires like Koch. So this guy does not care about social issues, really. I mean, this guy cares about money and business, and that's why Hillary maybe isn't so bad.
I don't think that this is sinister. I don't think it's trickery. I don't think it's deception. Hillary Clinton is probably the best balance of stability for big corporations while working within a generally acceptable framework, right? No Muslim bans, no claims of having been anointed by God to be president and bring about the second coming of Christ. I can understand why and this is not just right-wingers, I can understand why the rhetoric of Hillary Clinton, broadly speaking, would seem like the most stable when it comes to a corporate point of view. This is not me doing an ad hominem against Hillary or against Bernie or against anybody else, but just based on not rocking the boat, I can see why Hillary would seem like the safe choice.
Yeah, the Muslims can come in, they can open bank accounts and trade stocks and all of that, brokerage accounts. And we just won't regulate the banks and the brokerage and the investment firms either.
Unless they really need to be, as we've heard, in terms of a new Glass-Steagall.
Yeah, right. Well, I think they really needed to be quite some time ago, and they still really need to be. Hillary doesn't seem too interested in that.
Late last week, the Oklahoma House of Representatives passed a bill that fully bans abortions in the state. Now, that just passed the House. It hasn't become law yet. This is Oklahoma SB 1552. It passed 59-9. It is obviously a heavily Republican legislature, and the law is now on the desk of the state's Republican governor, Mary Fallin. If she signs it into law, the state could face one of the most intense federal legal battles on the issue of abortion. And we've seen attempts to ban abortion along many lines, make the procedure against the law, or make it really expensive for doctors to actually perform abortions by putting in place these outrageous hospital admitting policy requirements, or all sorts of other paths. What this would do, Lewis, is revoke the medical licenses of any doctor found performing the procedure for any reason other than in the case of a miscarriage or severe physical trauma to the fetus or pregnant woman. Doctors who perform abortions outside of that spectrum would face felony charges according to this new potential law, and the prohibition would include abortions required to save the life of a pregnant woman, but inducing an early birth to save the life of a fetus would be legal. This is from the text of SB 1552. We have it, I believe, to put up on the screen for people. Performance of an abortion, as defined by Section 1730 of Title 63 of the Oklahoma statutes, with an intention other than to increase the probability of a live birth, to preserve the life or health of the child after live birth, to remove an ectopic pregnancy, or to remove a dead unborn child who died as the result of a spontaneous miscarriage, accidental trauma, or a criminal assault on the pregnant female or her unborn child. When you hear this, you probably think, wait a second, what about Roe v. Wade? In 1973, the Supreme Court decided that women in the United States have a constitutional right to privacy with regard to medical choices. That includes abortion. Well, you wouldn't be the only one wondering about that. The Center for Reproductive Rights urged the governor not to sign the bill. Amanda Allen, who is the CRR's senior state legislative counsel, said to the Daily Dot that this is not only cruel but unconstitutional. If you thought the abortion situation was fine and dandy in Oklahoma prior to this ban, you'd be wrong anyway. CRR told the Daily Dot that the entire state of Oklahoma, Lewis, has only 2 abortion providers, period.
Well, it might be kind of dangerous to be an abortion provider in such a place. In a climate like that. You might worry for your safety, and I can imagine what the crowds look like around those clinics on any given day.
We know about the bullying. We know about the harassment. We also know that laws like this don't really reduce the number of abortions in any significant way. They do lead to more women dying as a result of these so-called back alley abortions. Maybe Oklahoma just has no other problems to solve, so they figure we're going to take on abortion. Not really. Once again, they rank near the bottom in so many areas, but they waste time on nonsense like this. Education quality, nearly last. Public health and healthcare, nearly last. Income, very, very low. taking care of the environment, air quality, disaster in Oklahoma, crime problems. Maybe the silver lining in Oklahoma is that they're only 16th worst for toxic chemical releases, something that they have going for them.
Maybe they just don't have enough big business willing to pollute coming to the state. Maybe they need to lower their tax rates.
It's only by virtue of their terrible business climate that they're only 16th in toxic chemical releases. You can be sure if it was a better place to do business, they'd have way more pollution. Yeah, so as usual, the states focusing the most time, energy, and money on banning legal medical procedures are the ones that have a lot of other stuff to worry about. Talk to me about this on our Facebook page, facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Very interesting interview coming up after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Dr. Philip Zimbardo, a psychologist well known for his Stanford Prison Experiment. He's here today to talk to us about what he sees as the growing issue of the disconnection of men and boys from society. Dr. Zimbardo, this is based on a study that you did. Talk to us about the study, the survey, how the data were collected.
I've been concerned about the issue of young men giving up on social reality and retreating into a world of virtual reality. Actually, let me just preface before we go into the survey we did, is that we have just written a new book called Man Interrupted, and it really sounds an alarm about a new threat to America, not from external enemies like ISIS terrorists. It's coming from within. It's really a whole generation of young men, I guess we can call it the internet generation, not millennials or anything, who have grown up living on the internet, living in a tech world. And what they're doing is they're spending much of their time playing video games and watching freely accessible pornography. The more they do that, the more they are failing in school because everything in the world is boring compared to video games and pornography. They're failing socially because when they start early enough retreating to their rooms, they're never learning basic social communication. And curiously, many of them are preferring porn sex over real sex when they can get it. So this is really a three-part tragedy. And the other thing is they become consumers of these multi-billion-dollar industries. The video game industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Porn industry, it's hard to know, but it's at least multi-million-dollar. But they don't create anything. If you're sitting in your room playing video games for 6, 10, or more hours every night, you're not reading, you're not writing, you're not playing instruments, you're not in athletics, you're not on team sports, you're not out in nature, and you're not dancing with girls.
So I think let's pause there. Conceptually, I think that makes sense. Sort of the thesis that you're putting forth. Talk to us now about how you gathered the data.
Yeah, we gathered data from it was online SurveyMonkey. We got 20,000 people responding. 75% were young men, ages 14 to I guess 20, 30. And essentially, we asked a series of questions about how they use their time, how they feel about their lives, where they find meaning in their lives, what kinds of activities they engage in, and the overall response was really very, very sad. We did this, I guess, 2 years ago. We did this. I gave a talk at TED a few years ago, I guess 2011, a very short 4-minute talk called On the Demise of Guys. And it was really based on no data. It was simply just more talking with young people and teaching young people, just my concern that this was a growing problem not only in our country, but in many countries throughout the world, of young men retreating to the world of virtual reality. And so the talk I gave on TED went viral, and I wrote a small ebook for them. But then in order to put it in a book, we really needed some data. So my co-author, Nikita Coulomb, and I collected this data. And the sad thing is, so many young men feel disconnected from society, feel that their life has no meaning, no focus, that they can't compete. They don't have the skills or ability to compete with other men. And now they don't have the skill ability to compete with other women, because women are doing better than ever, not only academically, intellectually, but even athletically. So there's a whole generation of young men, whose key terms are about themselves. I feel I'm lonely. I don't have many friends. I'm anxious, worried about a future with no good career, and then the other thing is.
Well, let's pause there if we can. There's a lot there, and I just sort of want to make this as conversational as possible.
Okay.
Some of the. I have some concerns about the survey, and I would love to tell them to you so that you can sort of alleviate my concerns if that's possible. As you mentioned, the initial TED Talk that spurred the creation of the ebook and the survey was, as you just mentioned in your own words, based on no data. And my concern in looking at the survey results are sort of multifold. And one of the concerns is huge self-selection bias. Number one, a lot of that traffic was driven to the survey through the traffic of the TED Talk, which, as you mentioned, was based on no data. So you already have individuals who either, number one, we just have basic self-selection bias by restricting it to those who found the survey through the TED Talk. And if you watch that TED Talk, that TED Talk, as you mentioned, is sort of depressing about the situation of boys and young men. So are you not sort of priming those individuals who really were giving their opinions about the status of men and boys in the survey? Aren't you priming them to give the exact answers which you were looking for?
I'm not sure. I mean, I understand all of these surveys are self-selected. It's people who go online, who are willing to give up time to do this. But given the size of the survey, I mean, the point is 20,000 people responded. So you can say, yes, it's self-selected, but it still represents a big swath of American youth.
Does it, though? Because 40% of the respondents only were under 25, and about a quarter were female, but you came away making very broad generalizations about quote, young men.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure what you want. How do you want me to answer that?
Well, in other words, my general concern is that the conclusions you came to are fascinating if they are indeed true, but there are some serious critiques that have been made that this was an online survey with huge self-selection bias, making very broad generalizations about, quote, young men, in spite of the fact that 60% of the respondents were over age 25 and a quarter were women.
Okay, I buy that.
So you agree that the generalizations you made may have been a little broad based on the logistics of the survey?
I agree, yes.
Okay, so what is your next step in investigating this? Because we started with this viral TED Talk with no data. We had a survey that indicated that you agree with me about my concerns. So what would you propose societally we do next to really try to figure out if this is an issue that is going on with young boys specifically, or if this is affecting men and women equally, or if it's affecting people of middle age similarly to those of young age? What else can we do to expand this?
We have been doing lots of interviews in many countries around the world. People have been writing to us. Individuals have been contacting us, Nikita and myself. We have a website, Demise of Guys, that we get lots of traffic through. And our simple point is that we look at the outcome data. We look at the extent to which young men are failing in school, they make up most of the highest percentage of kids in remedial classes. They get most of the D's and F's. More young men than young women are dropping out of high school and college.
And why do you think that is?
Our reasoning is that they have given up trying to compete, and that because they spend so much time playing video games and watching pornography, which they would rather be doing than anything else in the world, the issue then becomes school is boring. Somebody is talking to you in an analog format, typically without any even presentation images. So school becomes boring compared to playing video games. When you talk about an addiction, it's really not the amount of something you consume. It's really a psychological preference for this activity than anything else. And video games are designed to be enchanting. Pornography now is designed to be all engaging. And so if you do those games more than 4 or 5 hours a night, now we know, back up, there is evidence that playing video games in a modest amount, and modest probably is 2 or 3 hours, has positive cognitive impact. And it improves eye-hand coordination, improves planning, rapid responding. And it's not, they have not done a systematic study to show what is the breaking point between moderate and extreme, but I would say beyond 5 hours a night begins to be heavy use. And with heavy use comes a lot of negative effects, because now video games and pornography are played side by side. That is, all the evidence we have from interviews is that boys more than girls. Boys play video games much more than girls. Boys watch pornography much more than girls, boys and men, because they are both designed by men for men. They promote aggression, destruction, competition, and so far those industries, which are multi-billion-dollar industries, have not taken the time out to refocus for women. I'm sure they will shortly.
Yeah, I'm just curious. The interesting thing to me would be I agree with you. We know from a number of studies that men and young men are bigger consumers of both video games and pornography. But might there not be some broader, overreaching phenomena that we could look at, where while it's true that with pornography and video games it is disproportionately men, there are other social platforms, including, just as an example, Instagram and Pinterest, which skew heavily towards women? And isn't the sort of dopamine response that, whether it's the video gaming or the looking at Instagram pictures for men and women respectively, isn't the impact similar on the psyche in terms of that sort of dopamine response? I'm just trying to figure out how we're getting to this being a phenomena just for men.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe that the dopamine response, looking at an Instagram photo of even a naked person, is the same as watching a 15-minute highly intoxicating pornography session, or
fair enough,
playing World of Warcraft. And they're not comparable. I mean, the arousal that you get from not only looking. See, I mean, the difference between video games and Instagram is you're not just looking, you're doing. You're responding in microseconds, and so kids who become the more. And again, it's one of the few things that people who play video games know. The more you practice, the better you get. And there's very few things in their world that's true. That you're guaranteed that for every hour you put in, you're going to improve your rating, your level. And I don't see that. I don't see the comparison at all between looking at an Instagram and playing a video game. I mean, one is totally involving, engaging, absorbing, and we know there is data that the arousal level in the brain for both is site porn. Your brain on porn site indicates the incredible level of arousal that you get from watching porn is, it's the level you get from being addicted to virtually anything. And so I think your comparison is really a bad one. There's girls watch Instagram more, and so their dopamine level should be the same. I think it's a non-comparison for me.
Fair enough. No, and I wasn't suggesting the dopamine level would be the same, but that it's the same sort of mechanism or phenomena. But what I would encourage our audience to do is check out Dr. Zimbardo's survey, check out the new book, judge for yourselves. And what I hope, Dr. Zimbardo, it seems you agree with me, at least as far as the survey is concerned. Hopefully, we can get some peer-reviewed science on this and really figure out whether what you're suggesting is true. For today, I can't thank you enough for joining me.
Thank you so much. No, I agree absolutely. I mean, the survey was just giving us really a view of a portrait of the landscape to say, is there a problem? The other thing I should mention very quickly is a major problem we are identifying is the percentage of young men who are growing up without a father. Because divorce rate is moving up to 50% in America, half of all boys have no father, and fathers are critical for giving boys external motivation to perform. Mothers give love unconditionally. They love you simply because you exist. And you come home with a bad report card, they say, oh, try harder next time, Johnny. Mama loves you anyway. Papa doesn't love you anyway if you don't perform. So boys more than girls are losing that external stimulation. And so I think this is a separate problem which feeds into out of society, wanting to live their life in the virtual reality.
All right. Well, certainly a lot there that is opening up a whole other can of worms that we don't have time for today. But I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much again.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Some of the broader political issues we often discuss on the show are the anti-intellectualist movement of the American right, false equivalency often used by the right, religious right, bigotry, and one sort of lens through which we've discussed this issue is related to the LGBT community. And on American Family Association Radio, of course, the AFA, a designated hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, Brian Fisher, who's been on the show a bunch of times, said that officials who refuse to accept, for example, marriage equality or transgender rights with regard to going into the bathroom that corresponds with your gender identity, they will one day be seen as heroes, much like Harriet Tubman, who is going to replace Andrew Jackson on the front of the $20 bill. And I'm just going to play a little bit of this for you. This is Brian Fisher responding to the news about Harriet Tubman and the $20 bill. And he says, hey, we have heroes in this country, like those who are anti-trans bigots and don't like the bathroom bills that are being passed. Take a listen.
You know, what's interesting about Harriet Tubman, a couple of things about her that are interesting to me. She carried a small pistol with her on rescue missions. When she was leading, she led about 300 slaves to freedom, breaking the law all the while she was doing it. She was breaking the law all the while she was doing it, and she is a hero because she obeyed a higher law. A law that reduced human beings to slavery is an unjust law. She refused to accept it, and she is now an American hero. I'm suggesting the same thing for whichever state, and she's not even an elected official. So this is just outright anarchy and disobedience and rebellion. But because everybody recognizes that morally her cause was right, she's a hero. She's going to be on our currency, whether that's a good idea or not. She's going to be on our currency. And I'm suggesting the same thing when it comes to this, the homosexual agenda. The American hero is going to be the first governor or the first elected official. You think about what's going on in Virginia with these schools being told they have to allow men, boys, in girls' bathrooms. This is a horrible idea. You got young juvenile males, got hormones surging through their bodies. You're going to give them access to girls' shower rooms and locker rooms and bathrooms. I mean, that's about the stupidest idea, the most insane idea, the most dangerous idea I've ever heard. But how many schools are going to go along with it just because a federal judge says they have to. No, the heroes are going to be those elected officials, those school board officials, those principals that say, no, that's not going to happen.
The argument Brian Fisher is making is the cause that Harriet Tubman was furthering by breaking the law to carry a gun is the same as anti-trans politicians and elected officials banning people from using the bathroom that corresponds to their gender identity. Even though there's a law being broken, Harriet Tubman carrying a gun, or the anti-trans officials ignoring law on bathroom policy, that there is some bigger cause that is worth it or justifies the law breaking. This is, there's a completely legitimate moral dilemma here, right? Do you steal bread to feed your family? Do you put aside the smaller good for the bigger good or principle? The problem is this example is completely bogus. The main difference between homophobes and Harriet Tubman is that the homophobic anti-trans cause is morally wrong, and history will clearly vindicate that. The homophobes are like the slave owners, not the abolitionists. And this fits into so much of one of the narratives, of many of the narratives that we've been following on the show.
Yeah, slavery not being part of society anymore was kind of the logical direction. It was the clear direction we were headed in.
Right.
Especially when you look at other countries around the world at that time, that's the direction we were headed in. And he makes it sound like we're regressing in this department. He makes it sound like in 20 or 30 years. Right.
It'll be abundantly clear to everyone. Trans is bad. Keep them.
Gay people will have no rights.
Right.
Trans people will have no rights. Does he not see what's happening? Does he have no grasp of reality here?
It seems that way. He's using a mechanism called anchoring, which can work in a number of ways. And in this case, he's trying to anchor what he sees as the moral good of homophobia to that of freeing slaves. And he's done it before. Fisher has previously said there should be an underground railroad to deliver innocent children from same-sex households. So this is a common method: anchoring, projection, false equivalency, wrong choice. There's so many fallacious arguments being made here. It's good to be able to identify them. The trans bathroom controversy continues even beyond this, with more bigotry and threats of violence from Republicans. In a Facebook post, which has since been hidden from view, the likely new sheriff of Denton County, Texas, said he would beat a transgender woman so severely that she would end up in a hospital if she tried to share a bathroom with his daughter. This is the post reported by the Dallas Observer, which has since been removed from Facebook. This is Tracy Murphy. The quote is, "This whole bathroom thing is craziness I have never seen. All I can say is this. If my little girl is in a public women's restroom and a man, regardless of how he may identify, goes into the bathroom, he will then identify as a John Doe until he wakes up in whatever hospital he may be taken to. Your identity does not trump my little girl's safety. I identify as an overprotective father that loves his kids and would do anything to protect them." Now, in the comments to that Facebook post, Murphy insisted that he's not a bigot. This has nothing to do with bigotry. Of course, Lewis, it has nothing to do with bigotry. I've been telling you for years that even within the LGBT community, the transgender community is stigmatized, it is endangered, it is a community that is bashed, and if there was ever better proof of that, I haven't seen it. A soon-to-be sheriff would beat a trans woman unconscious. We have a real problem here.
Yeah, it's the post is funny because, and the response is funny because, well, I say funny, it's maybe it's not funny, maybe that's the wrong word.
Funny to avoid crime.
Yeah, because it just implies that whoever that person is who walks into the bathroom is somehow putting his daughter in harm's way, just by doing what exactly?
Yeah, it's by going to the bathroom, and it's still socially acceptable in many circles to advocate violence against the transgender community. There's a section of the right that thinks LGBT individuals are in a privileged position in society because of all of these different laws that are being passed. It's crazy. And the other pragmatic reality that these lunatics ignore is if a trans woman went to the men's room, they would also be completely ostracized by these individuals. You think the individual who says, "I'd beat a trans woman unconscious if she went into the women's bathroom," You think if they see the trans woman in the men's room, they're going to say, oh, great, no problem at all. Of course not. Of course not.
No. There's very little talk of that.
Yeah.
Talk of the mother threatening to beat up a trans man who is in the men's bathroom or whatever. I mean, it's like with so many, like Brian Fisher always talking about gay guys, and never once mentioning lesbians. And
as a totally pragmatic matter, women's bathrooms have all stalls, right? There's no urinals. What scenarios are people like Tracy Murphy even envisioning? It just makes no sense. And this is the type of bigoted incitement of violence that is problematic. Law enforcement should be protecting trans people against this. This guy is going to be the next sheriff. That is a truly scary thought. Hey, last week we did this story about a man who wants to marry his laptop to try to overturn gay marriage. And I said, hey, you can't marry a laptop because the laptop can't enter into a contract. It can't consent. On our voicemail number, 2192-DAVID-P, we had a funny voicemail about that.
Hey, David, this is just Joe, I suppose. I just listened to your episode about the guy trying to marry his laptop. It just occurred to me that you weren't necessarily being entirely fair with him. By your standard, I don't know about you, but personally, I signed a contract with my cell phone.
Yeah.
So. Anyway,
okay.
love the
Yeah.
show.
I mean, it's funny. Of course, you signed the contract with the cell phone company, which is a little bit different, but point taken, and it is still a clever point. On the bonus show today, PayPal had an all-male gender equality panel. We'll try to figure out what they figured out about gender equality. A bank that uses $10 routers was victim to an $80 million theft, and Special Forces cyber attacks against ISIS. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. You can, of course, sign up and get instant access at davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.